Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and welcome back to another TVlog. This time we have the Phineas and Ferb special, 1 hour special that aired months after the regular series finale of Phineas and Ferb, known as the O.W.C.A files. I always want to pronounce it OSHA, it's O.W.C.A. This is all about Perry the Platypus and Agent Monogram and Carl the Intern and all that side of everything. Phineas and Ferb make very small cameo, but otherwise are entirely absent. I guess I should just briefly state my history with Phineas and Ferb, because I don't know that I've ever spoken about them on this channel before. I like the show. I'm a fan of it. I was never, like, super into it, and I never really watched it live. I watched it mostly on Netflix, and I would catch up whenever they'd add new episodes, which wasn't very frequently. But I would say at this point I've seen a good 85% of the series. And yeah, I like it. I never really thought it was a series that was worth kind of sticking with week after week, trying to go and, watch each episode and stuff. Plus, I didn't have Disney XD for a while, so I couldn't watch it. Did it air on Disney XD? This aired on Disney XD. I didn't really watch Disney for a while. Anyway, my point being is that I consider myself a fan, and I do watch the show, but I'm not like a super fan. I'm not super into it, and I never was. This particular special, though, I'm gonna be honest with you right up front and say that I was not a fan of this. I thought this was pretty bad, to be honest with you. I guess I'll start with the good points. That I liked some of the jokes. Like, I can't really remember what jokes I laughed at, because I don't think they were great jokes, but there were definitely moments where I laughed. Doofenshmirtz, some of the stuff he says is, like, really, really funny. Yeah, I can't really remember off the top of my head, because there was a lot of stuff in this that wasn't very funny. But yeah, so it did make me laugh, and I do like the style that Dan and Jeff go for with Phineas and Ferb. I've always liked it. It's very, I don't even really know how you describe it. It's very, like, kind of pointing out, like, weird things. Like, Doofenshmirtz will say something and then kind of point out, oh, it's a $5 scone. Why was this scone so expensive? Like, he'll do a little thing about it. I don't know, it's just kind of always interesting. Which reminds me, semi-related, I would kill to see, like, a parody crossover between Phineas and Ferb and Rick and Morty, where Rick and Doofenshmirtz are, like, I don't know, they're in line at, like, a coffee shop or something. Like, I would kill for a sketch like that. That would be so funny to see those two characters interacting. But yeah, in terms of the rest of this, I thought it was really bad, and I think the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems, was it lacked focus. For a series that has always done a pretty good job at balancing two plots in every episode that, for the most part, didn't really have anything to do with each other. There was always the Perry plot and then the Phineas and Ferb plot, and, like, occasionally they would intersect, like getting rid of Phineas and Ferb's invention of the week. But for the most part, they were just kind of standalone stories, and they kind of balanced each other out well, because most of the stories on Phineas and Ferb weren't ones that needed a lot of time to tell. But it's funny, because in this, they do a terrible job of balancing things, because you have Carl and Monogram, who are, throughout this whole thing, trapped inside of the O.W.C.A building, because it was on lockdown. Okay, you have them, which we occasionally see, and at the very beginning of this, I thought Carl was going to be, like, the main character. And then you have Perry and his team, because it's part of this is about Perry forming a team and stopping being a rogue, or not a rogue, but a lone agent, and working as a team. And then in his team, there's also Doofenshmirtz, who kind of has a bit of a spotlight in it. So we're split between Monogram and Carl stuff, and then there's Perry and Doof stuff with the rest of the members of that team. And then on top of that, most befuddling of all, is that we also follow 3 insects that do very little. I'll get to them in a second. But okay, so even if the insects weren't here, and if it was just, Monogram, Carl, and Perry, and Doof, and then the rest of the agents, I still don't think they did a very good job balancing it. And it's not to say that you can't balance it. I mean, it's not that many characters or anything. I feel like not enough screen time was given to either, I guess. Like, I feel like if they wanted to make it about, like, Carl, if it was Carl's story of how he stepped up and kind of, took on his bigger role in the organization and stuff, and it was kind of his story, and Perry and everyone else was there, but it was like he was, kind of stepping up to into becoming a leader, I would be more okay with that, because, like, that, parts of this kind of felt like that's where they were going, but then that never really amounted to much, because a lot of the time was spent with Perry and Doof, and then the problem with their group is that of their group, of Perry and Doof's group, it's Perry the Platypus, who does not speak, and doesn't really emote very well either, to be honest. Doofenshmirtz, who doesn't shut up ever, and while I find a lot of his lines funny, some of them aren't, and some of them are supposed to be intentionally annoying to the other characters. And he has to speak a lot because the three other agents mostly don't speak. There's a cat that doesn't speak and doesn't do much of anything for most of it. It's kind of the joke. A hyena who, well, take a wild guess what the hyena is going to be doing most of the time. Doesn't speak. And then a bird who acts like a parrot and can, like, say a few things but doesn't speak in full sentences, really. So you have to have Doofenshmirtz talking most of the time. And these other animals that don't really give me much. Even Perry, and Perry's supposed to be, Perry's kind of the main character in this, I guess. I don't really get much from him, and in fact, most of his stuff is him kind of being a jerk and blowing off the rest of his team. So, like, that's part of it. Part of the story is supposed to be about how Perry learns to work with his team and stop being such a lone agent. But that doesn't really, that didn't come through because Perry can't talk. And I don't know what you do about that problem, because it'd be really weird and inexplicable if Perry started talking for this, but, I guess the only thing to do is to just not put so much of a focus on Perry, maybe. But it's weird, because Perry doesn't even seem to have that much focus on it. A lot of it's on Doof, and a lot of it's on this other stuff. Yeah, and, okay, I guess I'll talk about the insects as well. So from what I gleaned from people talking to me on Twitter, and I quickly looked up the wiki. Look at the wiki. Yeah, the wiki for Phineas and Ferb. These bugs were in one other episode where they had a very similar shtick. I didn't see this episode of they just wanted to get noticed by humans, and so from them being in that one episode apparently is enough to put them in this special and give them a significant-ish screen time. Like obviously they have the least screen time of anyone, but even still, they have a decent amount of screen time considering they do virtually nothing. Their joke is that, hey, we're little bugs, we want to get noticed by the organization, we want to get let into your organization, so we have to do things like stand behind magnifying glasses and put ourselves on photocopiers and all sorts of stuff like that to get noticed. That's like all they do in this. That's their entire shtick, and for the most part, they don't do anything that relates to anything. They're not the main villains. I kind of thought they might have been the main villains, like they were rejected from O.W.C.A and then they turned into villains or allied with the main villain. That didn't happen, which is especially weird because the main villain turned out to be a bug himself, and the whole theme of it was that it was fleas. That didn't happen. They weren't villains, and they didn't become agents at the end. It's not a story of going from nothing to something. They help. They do, but they help by being completely accidental, dropping a fan, and even that help isn't that much. It confuses me so much because these bugs don't do anything, and their shtick is the same thing. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna try to get noticed. Oh, we're gonna get smashed by a fan or something. Some bad stuff happens to them. Weird still, too, is that the main bug, the smart one, is voiced by J.K. Simmons, currently voicing Grunkle Ford right now, which is just like, did Bill turn Ford into a bug for a little bit after like, what? Just kind of weird. Not really the show's fault, but just, I don't know, weird disconnect, and kind of distracting. And then one of the other bugs also kind of looked and reminded me, the whole thing reminded me of Rocko's Modern Life. They had, and I think a few episodes, they had these little bugs that would, Flecko and whatever, that kind of had their own subplots and their own stories that kind of somewhat related to Rocko. And yeah, he looked like one of those bugs because he had the two giant eyes of not the same size. And that makes sense because the creators of Phineas and Ferb worked on Rocco. But even still, this feels so out of place here. Just so bad, unfortunately. And every time it cut to them, it really took me out of this. And I guess I should talk about the story, too, because it's a spy story. It's not very original. Like I said, it's the story of the guy learning to work, the spy learning to work as a team. The story is that this bad guy who was from Major Monogram's past comes back and wants to take over the organization because he has a grudge against them because whatever. And he does it by taking control of the other agents, and there's a lockdown, and only the one ragtag group of misfit agents have to come and take him down, and there's a evil lair that they break into and all that. It hits just all the cliches, and I don't have a problem with them using cliches if they're gonna do something with it. Like, if you want to use the foundation of a generic spy story, like if you want to use that as your foundation, and then on top of that you tell a ton of really good jokes, or on top of that you throw some really interesting twists into the mix, or you do something with it using that baseline, you subvert it midway through, that's fine, that's cool. There's no problem with using stereotypes just kind of as a baseline, a quick reference point to jump the viewers into something that they already are familiar with, and then throw something interesting and new on top of it. But this doesn't do that. It's just a generic, boring spy story. And when you have one of the main characters that can't speak, and other main characters that are bugs that do virtually nothing, and just eat up the hour-long screen time, it's 44 minutes without commercials. Although you could have easily cut this to 22. I don't know why this was an hour-long thing. That doesn't really make much sense to me. It just doesn't flow well. What else do I have for my notes here? It was cool that they included Doof here. That it makes sense. Like, there was tons of callbacks, and I know Phineas and Ferb is good with that, and that's cool. That's great. That's nice of them to do that. But that in and of itself doesn't make this good. It was kind of interesting that the Doof's missile shots ended up at the Flynn Fletcher household because everything Doof ever shoots off is magnetized to that house, just inexplicably. There's a point where Doof himself points out that all these animals are annoying. Because I went through why all the animals are kind of annoying. But Doof points this out, and this is a joke because he's being annoying too, but, like, just because you point out that characters are annoying doesn't make them less annoying. And it's, like, for a story about... Because the agents are bad agents. It's not that Perry doesn't want to work as a team, it's just the agents are really terrible. Of course, Doof is Doof, and the cat doesn't do anything, and, the hyena won't stop laughing, and then the bird doesn't, whatever. So there's kind of a reason, but they don't do... There's no point in which they learn or change in any way. There's no arc for these characters. All that happens is they're pretty terrible agents right up until Doof sings a song about teamwork, like this is the SpongeBob movie, and then just inexplicably they're good. And then there's also a part in which Doof shows the manual, and it turns out that Perry wrote a note. Instead of just storming off, he wrote a note like, hey guys, meet me at this location for the final climax of the movie that I for some reason know is going to happen here. I guess he led them there or whatever, but that part didn't make much sense to me, because why... It feels like such a lame mislead, and okay, Perry was supportive all along, but why did he do what he did? Why didn't he... it's part of the problem with Perry being a silent protagonist. You can't really know what he's thinking. But it's not like Perry goes through much of an arc either. It's not like there's a point in which he learns to be a better leader, or to better work as a team, or to be more forgiving or whatever. Because his chip on the shoulder with Doof isn't because he's just rivals with Doof. It's because, A, Doof is incompetent, and B, Doof blew up part of Phineas and Ferb's house. So that's kind of the beef. So, it's kind of understandable why there's that tension. But there's no point where the characters change and grow like they should in a story arc that, is this long. This much time should be spent on that. Yeah. No one really goes through it. And speaking of that, actually, there's several songs in this, unsurprisingly, and most of them are pretty cool. But there's a song, that Teamwork song. It's like the last song in the movie outside of like the very ending one. Oh my gosh, is that a terrible song? I remember Doof singing in the show, and I don't remember him being this gravelly. And teamwork, you take the team and you got the work. Yeah, his voice is. And on top of that song in particular, I found to be really just generic. Like, oh, so you take letters from characters' names and then it spells out teamwork. Okay, there's nothing else to the song but that. That's the entire song. And again, this is the turning point. This is where the Misfits turn it all around, and all it is a song about, hey, you think maybe we should be using teamwork this whole time? You think that was the answer? Because apparently teamwork somehow makes them less totally incompetent. I mean, teamwork certainly helps you, but if you're incompetent individually, you're probably also going to be incompetent as a team. It's not a case, in this episode, it's not a case where their incompetence kind of piles together to form like one competent unit. It just suddenly they become better agents. So yeah, I've gone on pretty long about this, but oh yeah, and then the last thing I guess I'll say is that at the end they had the images, like the still images of the characters on various other adventures now that they're an official team. Those adventures looked way cooler than this one. I didn't even mention the bad guy. I think passingly mentioned him earlier when I was talking about the story. Super generic. He turned out to be a flea. I mean, I guess I was slightly surprised. I knew there was something behind him and why Monogram didn't recognize him, but it's not like that twist was anything new. Yeah. I didn't like this. There were parts of it that I liked. Like, I don't think it was like a total failure, but I think narrative-wise, from a story perspective, it was very, very sloppy, and there weren't enough funny jokes for me to kind of, give a pass to some of the more sloppier and just generic stuff that this thing pulled through. If this is the last thing that we ever see from, like, the Phineas and Ferb franchise, that's pretty sad. Yeah, let me know what you guys thought. PIEGUYRULZ out.